Speaker, Australia's housing system is broken, as evidenced by the fact that our 30-year housing affordability decline has been among the worst in the developed world. Moreover, according to the 2016 census, homelessness has increased 13.7% in 5 years, and housing prices across Australia continue to rise, with a jump of 2.1% in February this year, the largest national monthly rise since August 2003. Deputy Speaker, in my home state of Tasmania, the median house price for first home buyer purchases hit a record high of $355,000 in 2020, compared to $335,000 in 2019 and $268,000 in 2015. Reports suggest this could be attributed to a serious undersupply of residential housing in Tasmania. Deputy Speaker, furthermore, Tasmania is now the most expensive place to rent than anywhere else in Australia, with rents rising 36% in the past 5 years. No wonder the Real Estate Institute of Australia estimates the proportion of income required to meet rent payments in Tasmania, or in Hobart, is now a staggering 29.5%, 5.5% higher than the national level. Deputy Speaker, the consequences of this are very human, with over 8,000 households in the private rental market now in housing stress in Tasmania. For example, today an article in the Mercury newspaper reported one woman who was told by her real estate agent that her rent was rising from $220 a week to $350 a week, a 59% increase. Deputy Speaker, moreover, there are 3,373 Tasmanians on the wait list for social housing, with priority applicants waiting an average of 64 weeks to be placed. Deputy Speaker, Tasmanian people aged 16 to 24 account for 1/3 of this wait list. And according to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, 1 in 4 Tasmanians accessing specialist homelessness services in 2020 were young people. In fact, on any given day, 499 young Tasmanians aged 16 to 24 are seeking housing services support. Deputy Speaker, my office has been inundated with people who have been sleeping in cars and on friends' couches for over 12 months. Many of these people are mothers with young children who have either been turned away from crisis accommodation, which is also at capacity, or are unable to go to crisis accommodation because it's simply unsuitable. Obviously, these people simply cannot afford private rental and have nowhere to go while they wait for public housing. Furthermore, the National Rental Affordability Scheme, a federal initiative which offers subsidised rent at 80% or less of the market value rent, has started to expire in Tasmania, leaving people unable to afford private rentals. And again, the consequences of this are very human. One person in my community, a disability pensioner, is facing life in a caravan park after losing financial support to pay the rent on his home via the NRAS. Deputy Speaker, and then there is the impact of short-stay accommodation, such as Airbnb, and the effect it's having on the rental market in Hobart, where a report released by the Australian Housing and Urban Research Institute shows that, worryingly, Hobart has the highest short-stay density in the country and one of the highest Airbnb densities in the world. Obviously, the lack of regulation in this area in Tasmania has led to more people converting their properties to short-term accommodation rather than making them available as long-term rentals, something that is urgently needed in Hobart. In fact, I understand, Deputy Speaker, that about 10% of residential property in Hobart is now short-stay accommodation. Significantly, the economic downturn resulting from COVID-19 has also placed many in the rental market at risk. And furthermore, JobKeeper and the JobSeeker supplements, which are finishing at the end of this month, are going to cause a whole new level of trouble. Deputy Speaker, a study by ANU suggests that winding back of these payments will push an extra 740,000 Australians across the country into poverty. These people will be forced to choose between paying their rent and bills, or feeding their family. Deputy Speaker, this is clearly unacceptable in a country as rich as Australia. And this research that we're seeing coming out, Deputy Speaker, is entirely consistent with recent research from Finder, which shows that almost half of Australia's workers would run out of money in under a month if they lost their job, because 1 in 5 people have less than $250 in their savings account. Deputy Speaker, clearly federal and state governments, and when it comes to short-stay accommodation, also local government, have to do something about this housing crisis, which is across the whole country, not just in Tasmania. But we need dramatic policy change at all levels of government, including, Deputy Speaker, we need more crisis accommodation. We need more in Tasmania, more Housing Tasmania properties and other social housing. We need more supported accommodation for people with special needs. We need tax reform, including watering down negative gearing and capital gains tax concessions. We need to introduce rent-to-buy public housing in jurisdictions where it doesn't exist. We need a 30% increase at least in Commonwealth rent assistance. We need permanent and improved grants and access to low-interest loans for first home buyers. And in my own city of Hobart, we need better public transport like light rail to better link areas of new housing growth with jobs and hospitals and other services. We must also, Deputy Speaker, return Airbnb and other short-stay accommodation to their original model, which was where locals could make a bit of extra money from their spare room or their granny flat or having an airbed on the lounge room floor. That way tourists could enjoy an authentic local experience without permanent residents, and in my home state, without Tasmanians being squeezed out of their own communities. Deputy Speaker, what I talk about will obviously cost money. It'll cost a lot of money. But we're a rich country and we can afford to ensure that there's a roof over everyone's head. It's as simple as that. You know, the GDP in Australia is worth, well, this is just before coronavirus, almost $2 trillion. I'll say that again. Australia's GDP, just before COVID, was worth almost $2 trillion a year. We're estimated to have the world's 14th biggest GDP and the 11th highest GDP per capita. We had 28, well, before COVID, 28 consecutive years of growth, one of the few economies in post-World War II period to achieve this.
Mind you, we sold all our mining companies, most of it goes overseas.
Hear, hear. Deputy Speaker, we are a rich country. We can afford this. Tasmania, you know, compared to the rest of the world, is a rich state. All of the other jurisdictions that are represented by honourable members, compared to the rest of the world, we're among the richest people in the world. We can afford the solutions. We can all afford more crisis accommodation, more public housing, more supported accommodation, sensible tax reform, introduction of rent-to-buy public housing. We can afford, if nothing else, to increase CRA by at least 30%. And I, through you, Deputy Speaker, I say to the Minister, these are the sorts of initiatives which are either within the domain of the federal government or there are opportunities for the federal government to work with the Minister's counterparts in the states and territories to try and solve these crises. And Deputy Speaker, I'd refer honourable members to my question today, which is another relevant point, the fact that the government is ceasing the equal remuneration order supplement for homelessness services at a time when, as we're discussing right here in this place right now, at a time that there's a homelessness crisis in this country. Deputy Speaker, one of the fundamental duties of a federal government is to ensure people have a roof over their head. And with that roof comes security and safety and better job opportunities, better health, a better upbringing for our children. So much of it flows from having a roof over our heads. But yet in this country, one of the richest in the world, there are way too many people who are sleeping rough, who are homeless, who are in tents down the park, who are in their mate's laundry or on their couch. We could do so much better, Deputy Speaker.